there's a way in which so many of us, from the imagination that gets sparked, we don't allow it to become something. It's not allowed to become generative. And so the key is, as we dwell and we explore imagination, we begin to activate it and experiment in as many situations as possible. And then the outcome pieces from those actions alone, new realities, new possibilities are born.
Some weeks the world feels loud and fast, and then someone reminds you the future is built in small, quiet decisions you make today. My guest is Ozioma Egwuonwu, founder of World Dream Day and BurnBright International. She's a strategist who helps people become what she calls dreamers who do. Together, we talk about future making, not prediction, but participation. How you reclaim your agency and align around what matters. And when you do that, you turn imagination into action with simple, repeatable moves. Why now? Well, many of us are tired of waiting for permission or perfect plans. We need a way to start today. By the end of this episode, you'll have a practical way to name your intention, ask better questions, and run tiny experiments that make change feel doable. Stay with me to the end, and I'll share with you my takeaways and a simple practice you can try in 5 minutes. I'm Andrea Sampson, and this is Sense Making Conversations. It's so great to see you. How are you?
And wonderful. It's so great to see you on here. It's just always a wonderful time to be with you.
And I absolutely love our conversations. And our guests here, I know, are going to really enjoy this. But I know you well, they don't. So I would love it if you could just give us a little bit of a sense of who you are. I know right now some of the things you're working on are really in the area of future making. And most people probably don't even know what that term is. So perhaps you could take us into your world and how you got to this place of future making.
Yeah. I was born in Nigeria. I was raised in New York, and my journey has been very different than other people's journeys when it comes professionally. I started out in the world of commercials and creating and producing and storytelling as well, independent theater. And then I found myself in this domain called strategic planning. And it was in that domain that I began to understand the importance of strategy and how once we begin to think and move in a particular way, we can actually amplify our chances of achieving our desired outcomes. And so from that love of strategy, I ended up, rising through the ranks and becoming a vice president of strategy, cultural insight, and innovation. And then I went out on my own and I started my own consulting company called BurnBright International. But at the same time, I was also very passionate about the ways in which ideas, goals, and dreams not only begin to germinate, but how they activate and make a difference in the world. And that led me to creating this initiative called World Dream Day. And I'll share a little bit more about that later. But this journey of understanding the importance of strategic thinking combined with the importance of ideas and impact is what has led me now into this space of realizing that we're at a time where the importance of future thinking, the importance of foresight, the importance of not only thinking about things theoretically, but rolling up our sleeves and taking action and playing a more engaged role in the future that develops is really where I center a great deal of my work with individuals and organizations and communities.
Ozioma, I'm always amazed at your background and the work you've done. And, so much of what, your background overlaps with mine. We both came through the agency world, we both came through the strategy world, but you've gone so deep into foresight and future making, and certainly the work you've done on World Dream Day. But, looking at future making and foresight planning, and both you and I have worked in a lot of futurist communities where foresight planning is talked about a lot. And it's important because it helps us to understand what's coming. It helps us to imagine what's possible. And it does tend to be a little bit more esoteric. And you've gone to that next state with as a future maker. So tell me from your perspective as a strategist, as a planner, as somebody who deeply understands the need to create a future. How did you even find that pathway and that bridge? And how have you gone from foresight into future making?
So again, it's a long, circuitous, but also a very exciting path. And so it actually begins once I had kind of reached to a point within the world of strategic planning. I was a vice president of strategy at that role, working with Madison Avenue, living the dream for many people, which was my dream at that point. And yet I knew that there was something greater. And in fact, it actually, I would say the future making lean actually began after I created what I thought was the most amazing strategic brief, and I handed it over to our head of creative strategy, and he read it and he kind of just shook his head. And I thought, oh, wow, he does not love what I created. And he says, you know, Ozioma, you have the kind of mind that could actually be helping us solve the world's problems. It's a shame that you're just helping X brand sell more phones. And I mean, you know, it just was one of those moments where I was like, yeah, but I really love what I'm doing right now. And one day I'm going to go out and play that role. But for right now, I'm very committed in doing what I was doing. And, you know, way led on to way. And I found myself at the end of a journey and the beginning of another. And so I left that corporate position. And what began was actually me at a Nigerian Day parade, meeting a woman who was asking me if I'd ever spoken at the United Nations. And I said, no. She's like, I'm sure you're going to speak at the United Nations one day. And within 3 weeks, I was there at the second International Day of Happiness talking about an initiative that I created called World Dream Day in 2012. And so that really was the
Wow.
beginning of future making, was realizing that, you know, when I was still that corporate professional, I went on a business trip and I read this quote that exploded in my consciousness that read, the world needs dreamers and the world needs doers. But above all, the world needs dreamers that do. And that to me is the core goosebumps, right? When you really understand that, that's the core of future making, right? Dreamers that do, people who have powerful visions of possibility that are willing to take action in service of the vision, in
Mm.
service of the dream. And so at that time, my world was so wrapped up in this language of dreams, which worked for some people. But some people look at dream and say, oh, that's so woo woo, that's so la la. We're about real world, right? So then it's ideas. And then suddenly I found myself also realizing that there's a way to speak this language in multiple ways. The dream is the same as an idea, is the same thing as a vision. And each one speaks to different audiences and different communities and different stakeholders. But by speaking to each of those domains, it's allowed the work itself to grow and to amplify. And so with visionary future making, which is what I call the work that I have been committed to doing, it actually began, and you play a role in this, of course, it began with a speaking engagement, Untold Futures, this opportunity to develop a framework, you know, for a special event that was taking place in Brazil. And suddenly, as I began to dig into what could a framework that can support leaders and being able to connect to and truly activate desired futures, that is where that framework actually began. But it's
Mhm.
rooted in the realization that we can't just be dreaming, we also have to take action. And after I began to create World Dream Day, then I moved to a place called Newburgh, New York, and I began working with the mayor and with the governor's office and all these different initiatives around how do we support the transformation of an entire community. And that's when I got my real understanding that a great deal of what takes place in our world, as we know, it's systemic. It's not just one component or another. And when you really engage in this conversation of future making, you're thinking systemically, you're thinking in a way that's engaged, and you're thinking in a way that engages multidimensional vision.
You know, as I was listening to you, and I'm thinking back to, that time when you were preparing for the Untold Futures talk, and we did a little bit of work together at that time. And I think one of the things that struck me just as you were talking now, because I remember those conversations, is that you were in a place of building, right? You were creating these frameworks and really doing some heavy lifting thinking and thinking through that. And we just did a lot of conversations at that time, you and I. And, when we think about foresight planning or future making, for me, so much of it starts with two things. One, conversation, because I think that's always the most important thing that we have in our society today is the ability to talk to each other. And when we talk to each other, to hear, to listen. But the second thing, because then this happens in conversation, is questioning, the ability to ask good questions. And I remember some of our conversation in those days was, sort of a back and forth on questioning. And it's through the process of questioning that we start to uncover the real problem. So, in your perspective, as you think about the work you do today, and certainly, I'll bring in the world we're living in that is filled with answers, right? We can get an answer now at the click of a button because there is many different AIs who are all willing to give us an answer. But tell me a little bit from your perspective on the importance of questioning and how that has driven you to become who you are today, to have the thoughts that you are thinking right now.
So, questioning at the root of it, right, also has this word, which is quest, right? We are
Mm,
questing. And
yes.
so, especially in the work that I do around personal development and coaching, it's about getting people into that questing state of consciousness, that questing state of awareness, right? So even when you're working with artificial intelligence, if you're not on a quest, then what are we doing here, right? And the quest drives the questions.
Oh, I love that.
Quest drives the questions. And one thing I do love is, I don't know if you've seen the Claude campaign. Again, this idea about it's never been tougher on problems or something about that. Have you seen this campaign for
No.
Claude? Okay. So essentially, it talks about how through the power of AI, it's not a good time to be a problem because AI can address these problems, right? So it's kind of like tongue in cheek and kind of interesting. But there's something to that, right? There's a world of problems. We know that. But there's also a world of solutions. And the solution doesn't live in AI. The solution lives in the way in which we utilize tools, of which AI is just one of them. But we ourselves are also technology. We ourselves also can play powerful roles when we partner as opposed to relinquish. And so the notion of questions and a well-formed question can guide us towards well-formed outcomes. And so it's about the way in which we make sure we even question our questions themselves. So when you generate a question, you say, is that deep enough? What am I really after here? What is this leading us towards? Right? And you play it out a bit more. And then from there, we allow it to continue to unfold until we feel that we've exhausted all possible inquiries for now.
The quest in question, like that, it's a beautiful sort of reframe of even the concept of question. But what I think you're really talking about, it's taking us into the realm of imagination because a quest, we have to be curious, right? We have to decide that we are going to go down a path of the unknown and we imagine what's possible because otherwise we wouldn't go on that quest, right? And so when we think about imagination, curiosity, imagination, these are the roots of innovation. And without them, we would still be living in caves and hitting rocks together for fire. But we've had the imagination throughout human history to evolve to the state where we are today. And now we're moving faster than we ever have. But how do you take imagination and translate it into systems, structures, and plans that are organized enough to take us in the pace that we're going at right now to the future that we actually want?
There's so many ways, and over the years I've developed so many different frameworks, and I'm so honored that so many organizations around the world invite me to support and to use these frameworks in service of their own growth and development as well as leaders. And so what I would say is this: there's one almost meta framework that I always talk about. Actually, there's two. There's one that comes from an academic named Hardin Tibbs. It's called The Future as a Strategic Landscape. And that frames us in, that one, yes. So here we are with all of our, our challenges, our past, our present, and we're looking out as at a desired outcome, the star, right? The guiding role. And there's choices we need to make, right? Which is represented by a chessboard. And there's a mountain that we have to overcome, which might be the hurdles or the challenges, etc. But we're trained upon that guiding vision, right, of possibility, if you will. In the framework that I utilize and that I developed, that kind of frames all of the work that I do. You start off with acknowledging yourself individually and collectively as agents of transformation. So imagination lives fully in that first fundamental state of awareness of we can create anything. And within us, there is so much potential. And that potential is amplified when we come together. So whether you're starting off with an individual transformation or collective transformation endeavor, you start off in that space of acknowledging that we are agents of possibility, agents of transformation. And the next stage is about realizing that that potential and that imagination can only fully be activated when we begin to engage in action. We begin to ask questions of ourselves and take risks, right? We begin to do experiments. We begin to go out like I did after leaving corporate America, putting up a dream wall in a community so that everyone can see the ideas, goals, and dreams exist here. And then from there, there's a way in which so many of us, from the imagination that gets sparked, we don't allow it to become something. It's not allowed to become generative. And so the key is, as we dwell and we explore imagination, we begin to activate it and experiment in as many situations as possible with as many different ways of being and doing and seeing as possible. And then the outcome pieces from those actions alone, harnessed and done in a strategic way, new realities, new paradigms, new possibilities are born. And so that is the three-stage process. That's almost like a meta framework, if you will. And then from there, the other frameworks emerge from it. But that is the foundation. Agents of transformation engaged in transformational processes and practices that support the co-creation and cultivation of new paradigms of possibility.
Wow. From imagination, I can imagine that this is where dreams live.
And vision dwells here as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I was gonna come to that, but I think I wanna go to dreams first
Mm.
because you started World Dream Day, you said in 2012, right? I know that every year you celebrate it and it gets bigger and it gets broader and you get more and more people into this concept of World Dream Day. What was the impetus behind it? Why did you start it? And what is it doing? I mean, 2012, that was what, 13 years ago. So 13 years in, what have you created? What are you seeing forming because of the work that you've been doing?
Andrea, it's remarkable what has emerged because we have ambassadors all over the world who are taking their own ideas, their own goals, their own dreams, and initiating their own movements. Just like we have with one ambassador in Rome. It began with her learning about World Dream Day, getting in contact. Next thing you know, she's renting out huge theaters in Rome to celebrate dreams, to explore the meaning of dream and possibility within the culture of Italy today, addressing the issues that she's seeing emerging in the community, creating alliances between Italy and Uganda and exploring ways in which organizations can learn from one another and then hosting these events. And this year we had patronage from the municipality of Rome. And so that's what you see. You see Peter Akpabon, who's like from my homeland, Nigeria, but a different area of Nigeria, bringing together the youth around creativity, renting out theaters, doing trainings, cultivating the importance of creative economy. And so what has emerged is every year we still celebrate. People all over the world discover it and celebrate through posts, but there is a curriculum and there's a way in which ambassadors are activating their own visions of possibility. And there's ways in which this year we had our 2-day event with 24 speakers, in which the United Nations
Wow.
also was a part of our Innovation Day. I spoke at their Innovation Day and they were part of our Impact Day. And so, yeah, it's really grown. And next year it's growing even further. So truly excited and honored that so many people understand. And I think this year the theme was Green Together. And I know that that theme resonated so much because there's so much polarity in the world. And this opportunity to really begin to dream of new possibilities was something that was truly meaningful in multiple contexts. And
Mm.
so the way that World Dream Day operates is I usually come up with a theme in conversation with others and looking at what's happening in terms of its trends. And that theme then becomes the holding and the galvanizing invitation that then guides the ways in which people celebrate for that year. Every year the theme changes in accordance with what the world needs.
For our listeners, just because I realize not everyone will know about World Dream Day. When is it?
September 25th.
September 25th. So we've just passed this year's. So for anyone listening who is interested in learning more, reach out. We'll give you Ozioma's contact details at the end. Make sure you do reach out to her because it is a powerful way to, really influence the future. And I think this is the thing for me. I've been working on a solo episode of this podcast because every now and then I like to do one where I just kind of have my own reflections. And one of the things I talk about a lot is the vision for the future that we want. And I think it's one of the things that's probably most challenging for most people. We look out to this big unknown thing we call the future. And every one of us has an idea of what the future should be, what we want, what it is, what it's going to be, all of those words that kind of describe something that is unknowable. And yet, when I think about dreams, like dreams feels so much kinder than a vision because a dream is something I can own and it can be my
Mm,
own and I can live with it and I can change it. But it is supportive of who I am and where I'm going. When I think about vision, and as I've been working on this solo episode, one of the things that came to me, and I would love your perspective on this, is that, really the difference between a dream and a vision is really just some fundamental pieces around what will achieve that dream. What are the building blocks, if you will,
mm,
of achievement? And so, from a vision, when we think about something as a world vision for all of us, how could we possibly ever create a vision for everyone? And I began to think about, well, what if we just agreed on the fundamentals? We don't have to agree on what it absolutely looks like, because of course, none of us are going to be right. There's going to be, 11 billion views of that future, of course. But if we are all at least imagining the same fundamentals, that will probably get us closer. And I wonder how dreams can play into that. Is that a way we can explore creating more of a shared vision for the future, or just even a shared vision in general for our companies, for our lives? Do dreams lead to vision?
that's really, really, really great inquiry and distinctions because when we think about where a dream lives, it is intimate, right? It is something that feels like it lives within you. And even when we do,
Mhm.
because World Dream Day is not just about, the day itself, there's actually practices and trainings and dreams to action accelerators, et cetera. So there's a training that we bring forth to support people in activating their dreams. And one of the key elements is when you begin to think about that dream, it lives inside of you. When we talk about vision, it almost lives
Yeah.
always often here. We close our eyes, we tap in. What do I see? What do I see unfolding? It's as if the eyes themselves grow these extenders and we extend it out into the future. And that is kind of what we often think about with vision. And so there is a connection there, right? When we connect and we connect to this idea of what is my dream or what's my dream for the world. And then the vision becomes about what would it take or how can that dream I have for the world become realized and how can I begin to see it? What's my vision for this? And so that's the way I kind of see it working
Mm.
together is this feeling and yearning that lives within that then becomes even more realizable because we can begin to see it as it unfolds. And that itself becomes my vision is to see a world where we're all at peace with one another, where we've left behind these great divides, where we honor all of life. So what's also beautiful about vision is that it is also very generative. Once we start speaking into a vision, it begets, it begets, it begets, and it unfolds. Whereas with the dream, it also does similar, but it's something that actually begins to almost crystallize in some ways. And
Mm.
so it becomes even stronger energetically, if you want to talk about the dream, when you often ask people about what's their dream, as it begins to become more real, it feels more concrete. Whereas with vision, very often when we talk about it, it begins even more expansive. And there is a connection there, a powerful one.
So, dreams are these internal, heart centered elements, these entities that live within us that we become very intimate with. They become a part of us, entwined with who we are. Vision becomes the outward extension, the work, the doing of how the dream may become manifest. And so, what I heard in that was that the connection is there between heart and mind, but it doesn't have to be. Dreams can be held within. Dreams can be just a motivating piece for us without actually ever being manifest. Whereas a
Absolutely.
vision has more of a, like you said, an outward extension, something that feels like we've got to be marching in lockstep towards it. So, I've heard you say this before is that dreams are blueprints for destiny. What does that mean? And like break that down because I think that's different again than vision.
I wouldn't necessarily say blueprints for destinies, but blueprints for possible realities,
Mm.
blueprints for possible unfolding realities. Absolutely. And it is a blueprint because, the dream itself, when you tap into it, and one thing about a dream is that it can also, yes, it's intimate. Yes, it tends to be birthed within a very personal space, but it's also shared, right? Because you can meet someone who also has a similar dream, and now we have a shared dream, right? Or a shared vision of the future. And so there's ways in which they can also begin to connect with one another. But the idea of dream as blueprints is such that if you were to map it out and to visualize how this dream, what it means to you and why it matters and all those things, in that dream are the essential components of something that actually could be built out, right? A
Mm,
future or a reality
right.
that issues from it. The vision is, if you would say, okay, what's my vision for this? Or what's a possible way? It's almost like the vision becomes ways in which that dream can become real, but the dream itself is its own, how do I say this? The dream itself becomes a blueprint because it actually holds almost like a treasure map, if you will, of the desired future and the desired reality that you would love to have manifest. And very often, though, I think the challenge is people say, oh, my dream is to become a singer. But what's really underneath that, right, is that you want to use your voice and you want your
Mhm.
voice to impact many people or to bring joy, or maybe you want to be known. Like there's a lot that's in that dream when we
Right.
begin to unpack it. And that's what I mean when I start talking about it as a blueprint. There's also, it also can be a roadmap for some people as well.
As we explore this concept of dreams and vision, and it can start to feel really floaty, like really esoteric, right? Like, how, okay, great. I have a dream. Maybe I do want to be, a world recognized singer. But when we think about a dream in the context of the work we do, of the countries that we live in, the societies that are being created, does dreaming have a place there? And if so, how do we use it constructively? How do we, go from dreaming to future making? How do we go from dreamers to dreamers that do?
So I would say that, of course, dreams have a powerful place, right? We look at Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we look at so much that has happened within our world, started off from a dream, an idea, a goal, a vision. To me, when I think about dream, I think it's actually very much connected to vision, very much connected to ideas. It's not that these aren't separate, it's just different ways in which this, and I'm going to say this
Yeah.
energy is being utilized and harnessed in a particular way. For some people, the word dream is what resonates more. For some people, it is vision. And for other people, it's ideas. And for other people, it's goals. And I share this wide spectrum because what we're talking about is a landscape of possibility. So, for example, when World Dream Day was first beginning, I was very intentional when I said ideas, goals, and dreams, because I knew that some people would have resistance to the language of dreams, but that is what we need now, this larger landscape of imagination. And so, yes, I think that there is a powerful role for dreams in our world. And if we think about, especially when it comes to civil rights in the United States of America and also how it's impacted the world, it was a dream that kicked it all off. Articulation of a powerful dream, and one that when people heard it and felt it, they said, wow, that dream is my dream too. And more people began to cohere around that. And that's what we really want.
That example, of course, one of the greatest speeches ever given by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I have a dream. And what I always love about whenever I listen to that, and I use it, as you know, in the work that I do, I use it as an example. Because one of the things that he did that I think is so powerful is that he gave us his dream in small pieces. He didn't come out and tell us about this long dream that he had. He gave us a little piece of it, and he let us, as the listener, integrate with that dream and imagine for a moment what that piece of that dream could look like, and then he would bring us into another piece of that dream. And I wonder, I think dreams are iterative in many ways,
Mhm.
whether we're talking about literal dreams we have at night or dreams that we hold in our heart for, who we want to be and how we want to show up. In reality, they change. They're these, like, it's like water in your hands. You can't really hold on to it, but you can feel it and it's there. And so part of, I think, the language of dreams is that it allows us to be less exact and more exploratory, bringing that imagination in. And so when we look out, we're living in a very divided
Yeah.
world right now. And so how do we use dreaming to bring us maybe just a little closer and help us
Yeah.
find pathways?
Yeah. You know, one thing that I really believe is that dreams are bridges. And that's how we use it, right? From the moment that you begin to tap into that dream as a potential realized future that brings in all the emotions and all of the imagination, it's an invitation to do what's required to cross that divide, to cross the bridge and enter into the promised land, if you will. And so that is the role that dreams play and the articulation of them, which is why it's so important for a day like World Dream Day to exist. Because what we're doing is we're saying each one of you around the world have ideas, goals, and dreams for what you desire and what you know could be possible and could make our world a better place. Bring them forth, identify the actions that can take place, and begin to take action on them. You may never do that any other day, but on World Dream Day, this is our invitation. And not only that, on World Dream Day, we acknowledge all the dreams and dreamers and innovators that have ever contributed to get our world to where it is today. And so this is about the legacy of innovation. It's about the legacy of imagination. This is about the legacy of possibility and the invitation to claim that and to activate it for yourself, for your community, for your businesses, families, and for our world. That's really at the heart of what World Dream Day is all about.
I know that World Dream Day is a big part of what you do, but it's not all of what you do. You
Not even the biggest part.
No, and I know that you've got a company called BurnBright International. Tell us a little bit about the work you're doing and how you're going from dreaming into that work that you do every day.
So, at the heart of all this is human potential. So, that's really what this is about. It's about saying, okay, when we talk about activating human potential, sometimes it's about going through the pathway and leveraging the power of dreams. In other ways, it's about leveraging and connecting to the language and the realm of vision. And what I find, especially when it comes to organizations and leaders, the language of vision, the language of ideas, that is where it's at. Because dream sometimes feels a little bit too far out, but it's still the same conversation, the conversation of possibility and human potential. And so within BurnBright International, that's where, I and then also partnering with different partners activate and develop strategic plans, conduct research, qualitative research, work with community leaders, help design strategic plans and get into few long range planning, transformational keynotes around whether it's Guatemala or Lithuania, et cetera. And so it's that nature of it's a strategic, it comes from the work that I've been doing around strategic planning, foresight, futures, et cetera. And it's really almost like the holding space that allows for us to really focus on how do we create transformational strategies that can generate higher level outcomes.
As I listen to that, and I like when we're talking about dreaming, we live in this liminal space. It's this beautiful sort of space of everything could be. We go into the world of strategic planning and it feels suddenly we're very grounded and we're solid, we're here. And I think for many of us right now in the world that we're living in, it's hard to even think about the next, 10 minutes, let alone the next 10 years. And we're feeling the fatigue of the energy that is living in our world today, and it is for many of us, it's difficult. And look, I'm sure there's many listeners who are not feeling this way, but I think there are equally as many who are. How do we keep moving forward with that fatigue, that future fatigue, right? Because that's what it is. It's like, I don't want to think about the future. I need to just get through right now. So how do we, whether it's dreaming, whether it's imagination, what is it that gets us out of that fatigue and allows us to remember that there is a tomorrow, that, look, everything always works out. It always does. We just need to get there.
Well, what I've been finding, and in the conversations that I'm invited into when it comes to organizational transformation, I mean, this year alone, working with top media companies and entertainment and storytelling, et cetera, the key thing is this notion of uncertainty. And how do we get comfortable with uncertainty while identifying what is it that is the unfolding story that we as an organization or as a community want to activate? And so, what you are starting to see is organizations and leaders saying, we don't know what the future is, but we're willing to do what we can to make it. And that's why visionary future making is resonating so powerfully, because the realization is if we can come together and begin to access not only the desired vision of the future, but in this particular model and framework that I've developed, from the moment you identify your desired future, you also then have to connect to the desired self. So, who do we need to become in order to activate that? And then
Right.
the next step becomes desired connections, right? Desired team. How do we need to relate with our teams or develop collaborations in order to activate that desired future? And the last component is desired contribution or desired organization. So now you're starting to see that we don't know what the future is, but when it comes to shaping it, when it comes to being a part of making it, if we can connect to the vision, connect to our own responsibility and our accountability, connect to what we want to connect, to contribute and how we want to relate to one another, we now have the foundation to go forward. And there's a series of steps that we engage in the visionary future making process that supports and actually helps us transcend future fatigue, because you begin to get activated in ways that support you with actually developing individually and collectively. And that excites so many people.
Yeah, because I think what you're saying there, and I think it makes so much sense, is that look, future fatigue really comes out of a sense of futile, like feeling futility, right? We feel like we have no agency. Like we actually, the future is happening outside of us, and there's no way for each of us to impact or create the future that we want. And so we begin to feel beaten down. And I think your point is well made that first of all, yes, we need to have an envisioned future. What is that desired future state? It gives us a place to look towards. But if that place is looking really far away or heavy, then the next place we need to look is within, because it's the inner person, and what is the belief set that's driving how I'm showing up every day, the belief set that is allowing me to feel the futility of my own lack of agency, because when I can address that, the futility goes away, right? And then the future isn't so far away. And then going into contribution, which that gives me purpose. Now I'm not just looking at myself and saying, what am I capable of? Now I'm asking myself, why do I want to do that? What is the purpose for it? Again, I know that you create frameworks. That's what you do as a strategist, as somebody who understands how to create movement forward. We need to have these pathways that give us a way to see ourselves so that we can find the path that works. And that framework, I think, is a really powerful one as a future maker, right? Like that's because that's really what you're doing is you're saying, whether you're a dreamer or whether you're a doer, and coming back to what you said earlier, it's the coming together of the dreamer who also does. And those two things can be really diametrically opposed at first, because dreaming doesn't feel like doing and doing doesn't feel like dreaming. But what if it did? And so is this a framework you use? And if so, tell us a little bit about some of the things that you're seeing and using this. What are the things that you're noticing, and how is it shifting futures?
Well, it's definitely a framework that I use personally, and also with organizations. And it was developed in 2000, and I think it was 2022 or 23. I was like, the years escape me, but this notion, I mean, ever since it was developed specifically for that experience in Brazil, it's been presented all over the world, in the United Nations, in California, in Guatemala, so on and so forth. And so what we find is that organizations love it because it gives them a way of working with their own desired development, right? And individuals and leaders love it because it allows them to be able to create a way forward for what it is that they want to activate. And the reason why that it works is because it's actually not okay. So here is what I have to say about the notion of many people developing frameworks, right? When you're a strategist and you've never actually been in the field, you'll develop in a way that's completely theoretical. And so, kind of what we have right now is we have a lot of people in the space of futures and so on and so forth who actually haven't done real work in transformation. And so people come to me and they say, how is your work so powerful, so good? It's because I left and went into the field. It's because I worked in community transformation. It's because I've also been trained in terms of coaching and development, et cetera. And also I have that background in terms of leadership management strategy and having trained and been a vice president for many years, right? So it's the constellation of being able to create frameworks that are future fit, frameworks that can help us cross that bridge because it's not coming out of a theoretical, although it's informed by it. It's actually being rooted in practice and then coming back and saying, here's a framework that actually reflects how things actually happen in the real world when we're talking about transformation and change. And so, key point, once we first look at that first foundational role, which is essentially saying the model is broken because we're only focused on desired future. We never ask desired self, desired contribution, desired connections and collaborations, right? Once we understand that we move from singular future to multi-dimensional relationship with the future, the next step is we have to ask, what is the current paradigm? And that's the next part of future making. There are ways in which we are showing up individually and collectively and within our society that are advancing us forward. And there's things that are holding us back and causing us to regress. And so we have to begin to assess the paradigm and get clear on what are the ways of being and doing that actually support, detract, or keep stagnant. And so when I'm working with leaders, working with organizations and communities, that becomes the next step, even with when I'm personal coaching. What's my current paradigm? Is it working for me? What are the ways in which I'm actually holding myself and my progress hostage, especially when it comes to organization? Like, what are the stories we tell that keep us doing the same old, right? What are the ways in which we keep holding ourselves back? Once you start to be honest about the paradigm, that is what is essential for things to change, right? So on one hand, we have this big picture vision. On the other hand, now we're dancing with reality.
And so what are you seeing from your perspective? Because you're working with all kinds of different groups and individuals. What are you seeing for our future?
What am I seeing for our future? What I am seeing for our future is there will be those who take the given or used future that is being handed to them. And there are those who are going to step forward and come together to create a brighter future. And that is what I see. I see people who may have started off feeling resigned or feeling daunted are now actually beginning to wake up in ways that say, you know what? We are actually invited to something greater, to become more, And of course, there's also that other thread. But what I've learned, especially from one of my mentors, who is Dr. Jean Houston, one of the founders of the Human Potential Movement, she has been wonderful in the sense of this. She says, and again, she's 88 years old. And so she always tells me, the more we talk about what's not working and what's broken, we slide into it. And if you think about it, every time we start talking about this, we're now leaning
We're
in
in
the
it.
old story.
Yeah,
We're
we're
in
in
it.
it. We're in it. And it takes us
So,
down.
yeah. And so, one thing we have to do is we have to get so passionate, so committed, so excited, so connected to the emerging story, the ascendance narrative, that we then come into coherence and begin to collaborate to co create that. And that's what I see. And yes, I do see things continuing down a certain path if those who are waking up and choosing to come together and cohere around these other modalities do not do what we are called and invited to do. It's a
Yeah,
must.
I mean, I hear that so strongly. I think that there's a couple of things that come up for me. I mean, one is, this sort of bifurcation of our society today, right? Like we've got, I think those of us who look out and say, look, the future is unwritten and it's hopeful. And there are those people who say the future is written and it's dire. That's a choice that we make in every moment. And which one serves you? Which future serves you best? Choose that one and then do the work that it takes to actually create that future. And I think that's the first thing. And I use the word hope. I think that's part of it, right? As we look out, one of the challenges I think we have today is that hope has been it's a bit of a dirty word. I mean, not to me for sure, but I certainly feel it for a lot of people. And so, as a person who lives in the world of dreams and imagination and creation and innovation, and you're looking at all of what's possible, and especially through the lens of human potential, what words of hope can you help our listeners find and really resonate with?
One thing that became apparent to me when speaking to one of my dear friends, Lala de Henzelen, who is one of the futurists, female futurists in Brazil from many, many, many decades. And we were talking about this because I asked her, I said, "You've been doing this work. What do you see? How do you keep going?" And then she asked me the same question. And my answer was this: I don't know what the future holds, but I know what I'm committed to. And I know what I wake up each
Mm,
day in service to. And so whether or not I get to see it, like the person who plants a tree, knowing that they may never get to see it, I am committed to it. And so that's what I would invite people to do and to be, is to begin to galvanize and realize that it is not about whether or not you get to see this world that you believe in, this dream that you hold, this vision of possibility. It's about our commitment to it. And that is what gives me
mm.
hope and continues me along the path.
I love that. We don't plant a tree to expect that we're gonna sit under it when it's 40 feet tall. We plant the tree because we love the tree, and we hope that it'll get to 40 feet one day. And that, I think, is such a beautiful, beautiful way to maybe bring this all together. Ozioma, what would you like to leave our listeners with?
I would like to leave our listeners with a reminder of your own agency, a reminder that you have the power and the invitation to question more, to imagine more, to dream more, and to take actions, no matter how small, to advance the vision of the future that you want to advance. And most importantly, to become the version of yourself that can support the activation, the cultivation of that desired future.
That is so beautiful. You've just given us such a challenge and a choice. Thank you. How can our listeners keep in touch with you?
So I am on Instagram and I am on LinkedIn with my name, just Ozioma is the handle, but Ozioma Egwuonwu. And you can also go to worlddreamday.org and get registered, join us, and potentially, if you're interested, become a World Dream Day ambassador for one of the years or for many years. We totally love people activating and becoming World Dream Day ambassadors. And most importantly, I would just say one of the key ways that you can connect to me is just send me an email. You can email me, which is something that I really invite people to do. And so if you go to my website, oziomaegwuonwu.com, you'll find my email there, and send me an email and let me know what you think or what you're up to in the world.
Thank you so much. This has been such a beautiful conversation. I have enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for your time, and thank you to our listeners for listening. And I urge every one of you, first of all, go and register at World Dream Day. But secondly, recognize that you do have agency, that you do have a choice, and that you can dream and you can build that dream. And that's up to you. Thank you.